Yes, welcome in. The swing is back. Football season is officially done, so we now pick this up on a weekly basis, Jesse, as the Badgers get their season off to a pretty good start. We haven't talked, I think, since before the season, and they're off to a 7-2 start. We saw them blow out Marquette on Saturday. That's essentially been the story of their season. They either blow the other team out or they get beat by double digits. Obviously, the one blowout to BYU and then beat by TCU by double digits. But that's what essentially the story of the season so far.
Yeah, I know that we're going to be talking a lot about the Marquette game because it just happened. We were both there. Two things can be true. Marquette is not a very good basketball team this season. They're 5-5 at this point. But also, I thought it showed you or was a reminder of how dangerous this team can be and how entertaining this team can be. But of course, the caveat is you got to do that consistently. And as you mentioned, it went down to a tremendously talented BYU team and lost handily. And then in the tournament, lost to TCU, made it a game, but obviously couldn't get close enough and ended up losing by double figures. But overall, 7-2 at this point, when you've got a team with this many scores, it's certainly been entertaining to see. And I think gives fans a reason for optimism and excitement as we move closer and closer to the heart of Big Ten play.
Yes, obviously Wisconsin got their Big Ten season underway last week against Northwestern. They'll be at Nebraska on Wednesday, and then I think there's a break again, and then you get into Big Ten play after the first of the year, I think it is, or is it? It's yeah. So they've got a little bit of time before they do dive into that meat of the schedule. Before we get started, for anybody that doesn't know that's listening to this, we do have a YouTube channel. It's called The Camp YouTube, or I should say, just go search The Camp Badgers maybe and find it, subscribe, watch our episodes up there. We'll also have some interviews up there and that type of stuff throughout the season. And Badger Connect is also the place to get all your written content.
Yes, we've got the story up from Wisconsin's blowout against Marquette. It's been a busy week. There was a story Monday through Saturday up there, or a video, and we've got a lot more cool stuff on the way at Badger Connect.
Yep, check it out, badgerconnect.com. All right, let's jump into this. I didn't really know how I wanted to do this because we haven't talked in so long. So I think I just wanted to kind of break it down into what you've seen so far that has you excited and what you've seen so far that perhaps has you worried. And I think we will start with what has you excited.
Well, there's a lot more that has me excited than what has me worried. Obviously, this team isn't perfect and has some issues to clean up. But I think we need to start with what we've seen from both John Blackwell and Nick Boyd. And we'll get to the other guys because there have been contributions everywhere. John Blackwell just dropped his third 30-point game. He is so smooth. He has taken the exact leap you hoped he would have taken from his sophomore to his junior year. He had 20 points by the half. And if he hadn't picked up his third foul a few seconds into the second half, could have just left him out there for every second, and maybe he could have challenged the 43-point single game school record. It was funny listening to Greg Gard talk about that after the game. Like, John didn't want to come out near the end, and Greg was like, hey, you're not getting that record in a couple minutes. But he's been fantastic. He's averaging 21 points per game. His three-point shooting is back where it was or close to it from his freshman year. That was one of the biggest things that NBA scouts told him because he did pursue the NBA draft or the workouts over the summer. And it was, you got to be more explosive at the rim and your three-point shooting has to improve. And he's obviously taken those lessons, but Nick Boyd as well. The pace that he plays with, which is something this staff was talking about way back in the summer. Now everyone has had an opportunity to see it. The Marquette game was not his best performance, but he still manages to get 15 points and get a handful of rebounds and move the ball, get some assists. If Blackwell's led the team in scoring 5 times so far, Boyd's done it 3 times, and he dropped that 36-point explosion against Providence. He's averaging 20.2 points per game. And you and I were talking about this during the Marquette game, but they haven't had one player average 20 points a game for an entire season since 1994-95. Michael Finley.
31 years.
A lot of guys have been close. Obviously, John Tonje was at 19.6 last year. Orlando Tucker had 19.9. Devin Harris was close. But 20 plus, haven't seen it very often. You know what we've never seen? two dudes pull that off. And I realize when we talk about Wisconsin basketball now, it's like an apples to oranges comparison for many decades because this is a supercharged version of the modern era of college basketball. But what has me excited, that 1-2 backcourt combination. And that doesn't even mention Andrew Rohde and Nolan Winter and Alexis Bielauskis. So that's where I wanted to start.
It's a good place to start. I don't know if you went back even further than we did when we were at the game. I imagine there's nobody past 1967 or two people past since 1967 that have done it. Did you go further back?
I did.
Okay.
CFB Reference is a great site, and
they have stats all the way back then.
They had stats going back into the 40s.
Okay.
And you can't tell me that before then you had teams scoring very many points, but I think Wisconsin's official fact book goes back to 66, 67. And so I started from that point and worked backwards. And no, I don't believe Wisconsin's ever had two dudes average 20 plus a game. And obviously we're only 9 games into the season and it's going to get much harder. And they're probably not going to average 87 points a game this year because you're going to face some top talented defenses. But just the fact that those guys have a shot because of how well they can score, it speaks to the high-end talent this group has. And obviously also the way the offense has evolved here in the last handful of years. But it's exciting.
How do you think they play off of each other?
Well, I mean, Nick is going to find you. I mean, yes, he likes to get into the lane, but if he draws defenders, he will find you. And I just think that John being able to play a little bit more off the ball frees him up to do some different things. Obviously, this team is much better overall with Nick in there because of his ability to break down defenders and draw people and have some success. So I think the other thing is there's clearly respect for each other's game and that so-called alpha dog mentality, because those are the two that are sort of pulling everybody along. And I think that competition has made them better.
Absolutely. So you mentioned some of the other guys that we have seen here so far. And I think just because of what happened with the Marquette game and the way it played out, I think because coming into this year, we all thought it was going to be Austin Rapp starting alongside Nolan Winter. And that was the case for the first, what was it? 7 games, first 7 games. That was the case. Now he's coming off the bench and now it's Alexis Bielauskis getting the start next to him. And I mean, he had a double-double yesterday. I don't know how much did we expect of him coming into this year? I feel like we didn't know because there was just nothing. There was no, you can look at overseas and see how that stuff's played out, but I certainly wasn't expecting him to have this big of a role this early.
I had no idea. Frankly, if I had to guess, of the 4 freshmen that came in, I might have put him fourth because we knew so little about him. Zach Kinziger and Will Garlock are guys you've seen for a really long time, and the staff was raving about what Garlock was able to do with his athleticism, and Kinziger's shooting ability stood out, and Hayden Jones too. But Alexis Bielauskis, you don't, he's over there playing in Lithuania. It's not like I'm breaking down film of him. And big guys generally, it takes a while, especially at Wisconsin, for them to get into a rhythm. But I've been, and I'm sure everyone else has been, so pleasantly surprised by what he's been able to provide. He is just so solid out there. And the double-double was unexpected because it really was a 3-point explosion the last 5 minutes, 6 seconds of the game. It's like 5:06 left is when he hit the first 3, and then he just went ahead and made all 3 and ended up with a double-double. But even without that, he had 10 rebounds at that point, and that's what they need. He's clearly got the ability to stretch the floor, but the physicality that he plays with, and it's been really fascinating to watch these last couple of games because you're right. Austin Rapp came here to be a starter, to be a 3-point threat, to help stretch the floor. But when you put Alexis in there, it allows him to play the 5 and Nolan to play the 4, and that might be better for Nolan. And I also think Austin Rapp deserves some credit here for not sulking because you don't have the kind of year that he did a year ago and then come to a place like Wisconsin where you're starting and you expect 7 games in the season to be coming off the bench. Now, he's still playing a ton of minutes, but he had 13 points off the bench against Northwestern, ended up with 7 points against Marquette. And I think that gives them a spark off the bench in terms of scoring that down the stretch here, or as we get more into the season, could prove to be needed. I mean, the more we see of Alexis, the harder it is to believe you're just going to take him out of the starting lineup unless you feel that there's a matchup situation. They have the flexibility to do that. But I thought it was interesting when Greg was talking about Alexis when he first got here, because you want to talk about an absolute culture shock. And he was saying Hayden Jones they speak English as their primary language in New Zealand. Austin Rap in Australia, it's the same thing. Well, English is not Alexis's first language, obviously. And when Greg said after his parents left, it was hard few days. Like, he didn't know anybody here. The only person he'd even met in person was Lance Randall, the assistant coach, because he went to watch him in the U20 tournament. So it's not been easy, but credit to him for what he's been able to do early on. And I think there's a lot of talent there and reason for excitement.
I think this was Alexis that Greg was talking about, but he was driving down, I think it was driving down Dayton, and he saw a guy walking by, and it looked like Alexis, but he pulled over, got out of the car, and went and introduced himself. That's the first time they had ever talked. I shouldn't say talked. That's the first time they had ever met each other, was in that in that moment, just that random moment on campus. So yeah, he didn't know anybody, and that was what? Was it August they got here? It was late.
Yeah,
it was late.
I was actually covering, I want to say, so it was Wisconsin volleyball match. I think Wisconsin was playing Texas at the Kohl Center, and I was there to do a story for Badger Connect. And all of a sudden, Hayden and Alexis pop out, and Alexis is there with his parents and brother. And it's like, what's going on? Oh, this is the first hour he's ever been in Madison. Talk about an experience, man. So, and that's part of it too. Like, what makes this even more remarkable, he didn't get those 8 weeks in the summer like pretty much everybody else did. Obviously, Hayden didn't, because both those guys were competing internationally. So that is a critical time, not only for bonding, but for understanding what I'm about to walk into. And he just shows up at the end of August, and here he is now getting huge minutes and contributing.
Yeah, physically, when you look at him, he doesn't look like a freshman. He looks like a guy that's been playing with a lot of older people, and that's obviously the case. He was, but like the presence and the physicality, I think, that he brings is something that maybe they're not necessarily getting currently from Austin Rap. I think that's certainly part of it. And Austin was in foul trouble on Saturday, but the first time he came off the bench, he played more minutes than Bielawskis. And Greg said he didn't know whether this was going to be something that he was going to continue. He doesn't want to play musical chairs, and this goes all the way back to Bo. It doesn't really matter who starts; it's about who finishes. But those are for close games. Right now, there's no close games to be able to figure out exactly what that's going to look like. But I would not be shocked at all, and at this point, I would expect it to have Alexis be on the floor instead of Austin if it's a close game down the stretch.
Yeah, and again, some of this may depend on matchups and how well somebody's playing. If Alexis is just giving you 2 rebounds and Austin comes in and hits a couple threes, like, I think that's part of this too. Austin has been a bit of a streaky shooter, and he's going to continue to fire him up. But I do think that having somebody like him come off the bench is really helpful for this group.
Another thing of us coming into this year with Nolan Winter having to take over as the big guy, right? He had Steven Crowell last year, doesn't have him this year. I feel like it's been he's played the 4 and the 5. I think that's also allowing, like, when you have Bielawskis out there, he can play the 5. And I don't think Austin Rapp can at this point. But Nolan had another double-double, 13 points, 13 rebounds. I believe that's his second or third on the year already. And his 5th. Okay, well, I can count very poorly, apparently. So he has stepped up, but he still, I don't know that has his offense necessarily going the exact way that he would want it at this point, especially from outside. But early returns, what do you think?
I think he's been tremendous, and he's made the leap that they hoped he would make his junior year. We may have discussed this the last time we did a show. I know we had Brad Davison on, but I wrote a story about Nolan, and when I was talking to Greg Steamsman, Joe Krabanoff, 2 guys that Nolan worked with a ton during the offseason, and Krabanoff felt very strongly that Nolan's season a year ago was pretty underrated, and I understand why he didn't get as much attention. He was 4th on the team in scoring. He only played like 20 minutes a game. But if you just looked at some of these statistics and compared them to other dudes, like, the staff was looking at it like, this guy's 19 or 20. He's a sophomore. He's 7 foot, and he's shooting 71.5% from 2s, 36% on 3s, and whatever it was, 76% on free throws. Krabanoff is like, find me other 19-year-olds who are 7 feet and can do that. And he's like, They're all in the NBA. And I was laughing. And he's like, no, seriously, go look. And so they knew that this was a huge offseason for him. The big thing, it was a couple things. You got to get stronger, which is something that we see pretty much with every big man who comes in here. But Greg Steamsma worked with him a lot on some of his post moves, like being able to rip the ball through, not bring it down, and be strong with it when you're absorbing contact at the rim. And they felt like they're going to let him shoot all the threes as long as he's got that confidence, because they know that over time the percentage will even out to a point where it's beneficial for them. But the confidence is the other part. And I think, we've seen so many different big men over the years. And most recently we saw Steven Crowell. And that was one thing that was just consistent throughout his career. Like, oh, well, when he's on or when he wants to be or when all of that comes together. And with Nolan, I think there's also the ceiling feels so much higher too. It's a different type of game, obviously, but he had 3 double-doubles as a starter all of last season, and he's already got 5. And you look at the numbers, and he's almost averaging a double-double. I wouldn't necessarily expect that to be the case over the course of a season, given who they have to play, but I also don't think it's impossible. And that hasn't happened very often either. I think with Ethan Happ might be the only guy who averaged a double-double for a season in the last, 30 or 20 plus years. It's been a long time. But Nolan has obviously made a huge leap, and there's more room for growth when you've got 2 guys averaging 41 points per game. You might not have as many opportunities to shoot, but as a team, they're scoring more points than we've seen, certainly in our lifetime. So there are a lot of opportunities for him to be able to take advantage.
What year was that for Ethan? Was it the 2018 year?
I think so. I looked this up for the story that I wrote on Nolan. I think he did average a double-double one year, maybe his senior year.
Yeah,
but beyond that, it's been quite a while.
Yeah, I'm just gonna look here real quick. Yeah, he averaged 10.1 rebounds. I should say 17.3 points and just over 10 rebounds a game back in 2018. Yeah. The 2018-19 team that I believe ended up in San Jose and got knocked out of there by Oregon as a 5-12 game, I believe. But yeah, so
here's the other. Yeah, so I pulled up my story. I know, sorry to cut you off, but this was the thing that stood out most to me because Krabbenhoff was talking about his efficiency, effective field goal percentage that basically measures shooting efficiency by adjusting for 3-pointers. And last year, Nolan was at 64%. So obviously 71.5% from 2, and then however they factor in the 3-point percentage. So that 64% was the best by a Wisconsin starter since Tim Locum in 1990-91. And obviously he made a lot more threes. But I just think Nolan is the kind of player that with all the skill set, you don't really see that very often, even at a place like Wisconsin. And I believe Ethan Happ is the only one who's averaged double-double for a season in the last 30 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. I would assume it was Rashard Griffith before that.
Yeah, put me on the spot. I don't know.
I'll look at it. Yeah, whatever is it? Oh yeah, Rashard Griffith for sure.
93, 94.
I think it was 94, 95. He averaged 17 and 2 a game. Or I should say 17.2 a game, and then he had what was it? I don't know why they don't put the percentages of rebounds up there too in the book, but I don't. And 10.8 rebounds per game. So, yeah, pretty impressive, and that's pretty good company to be in with Ethan Happ and Rashard Griffith where he's at. The one thing, obviously, and maybe we'll talk about this one, what has you concerned, not off to a very good shooting season so far from outside. Is 4 for 21, I think it is.
Yeah.
So that is something that will need to improve. But inside the arc, he's shooting 73, 74% on twos. So yeah, he's been really good. Austin Rapp, he gives them some shooting. Certainly, there's growth that needs to happen there. Off the bench, and we can talk. Actually, we haven't even talked about Andrew Rohde. Let's stay with the starters here before we do. Had a breakout game on Saturday against Marquette, and his lone chance to play against a school that was closer to him than Wisconsin was, and coming out of Brookfield. So the thing about him is, I feel like when his shot starts coming, then all of a sudden he becomes even more of a weapon. I think he's been solid, but if that shot comes along, then you're going to see, I think, this offense take even a bigger leap forward. If some of these guys start hitting shots that we know that they can with him and Winter.
Yeah, I think it's come maybe a little more slowly than I would have thought with Rhodey, but you saw against Marquette what he's capable of. Absolutely lethal from the outside. And when he pulled up from the Culver's logo and absolutely drilled it, I was just like, this dude is feeling it right now.
At the buzzer.
But that's the kind of range that he possesses. And so if you throw that into the mix and you've got guys like Blackwell and Boyd who can break down defenders and kick it out, I just don't know what you do as an opponent. But you can say that about a lot of teams. Like,
Yes.
if all these guys start making shots, and we've said it about Wisconsin for a long time, but at the very least, you can say you've seen it from each of these guys at certain points in this point of the season. And his journey is just really intriguing because it's so unusual as an in-state guy. And Shaka Smart mentioned this, that they were very familiar with him. He was high school teammates with David Joplin, who played at Marquette, but he was a late bloomer, and like Wisconsin was aware of him, but he wasn't ready for Big Ten basketball or really, I mean, any major conference basketball, which is why he ended up going to St. Thomas in Minnesota and had a great year, and then ended up transferring to Virginia. And Wisconsin was interested in him at that point, didn't get him, but now the next time around they were able to land him, and you can tell from talking to him how important it is for him to be a part of this program as an in-state guy. And if he can keep playing like that, certainly it's going to be trouble for some opponents.
Absolutely. Looking at the bench, how do you think it has played out so far?
I think it's been uneven. That would perhaps be one of the concerns I have in general. Obviously, most teams are going to start the season out playing more guys, and then when you get into some meaningful matchups, your bench gets a little bit smaller. You look at how many minutes guys played, and it was really Austin Rapp came off the bench, Jack Janicki, Braden Carrington. And I do like some of what I've seen from Braden Carrington. I know he didn't have a good shooting day against Marquette, but he is not afraid to shoot some threes, and he's hit a handful of them. And I think defensively, he can do some things. I also think Andrew Rhodey is an underrated defender too. It feels like he gets his hands on a lot of passing lanes and ends up getting some steals. But it's not as deep. Will Garlock has played a handful of minutes. Hayden Jones is on the fringe. Don't necessarily see a ton of him in a lot of these games. So that would be one area of concern, is what happens if you need these bench guys to be more productive or need them to play more minutes. But it is a bit of a feeling out process this early in the season to see exactly what your rotation is going to be and how deep you want to go.
Absolutely. Anything else on what has you excited before we do jump into perhaps some of the things that have you concerned?
Well, the scoring. I mean,
yeah, they're averaging 87 a game.
Yeah, that's always exciting. So, but we can flip around.
No, that's fine. They're averaging almost 88 a game. I mean, every win that they've had, as I mentioned at the top of the show, has been by double digits. Their offense has been efficient. I think it probably could take an even bigger step up, because when you look at what they did to Northwestern in the first half the other day, that was as perfect of basketball you could possibly play on the offensive end. 15 assists on 17 made baskets, no turnovers, shot it relatively well from three, saw the ball movement. Obviously, you don't get 15 assists if the ball's not moving. It was as pretty as it possibly can, and it led to 55 points. That is who I think that they can be. When you're talking about scoring wise, that is the thing that would have me excited, is that's the ceiling, I think, for them. Now, how often can they play towards that ceiling?
Right. That's the key question. We've said that about a lot of Wisconsin teams
I know.
over the years.
And quite honestly, that's every team in the country, right? Like, if they can play their best, but we've seen them play their best. Not every team. I think their ceiling is higher than a lot of teams. That would be talking about, well, if we play our best ball, their ceiling's higher with some of the offensive weapons they have.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. All right, let's jump into what has you worried?
Well, it's interesting, this evolution offensively, and we can get into the defensive side too. But hey, offense is sexier. They averaged 28.4 3-point attempts a game a year ago, which was a school record. And Greg said this offseason, we're going to shoot even more threes. And that sounds very exciting. And it's proven to be true. They're averaging 33 3-point attempts per game. They took exactly 33 against Marquette and were able to make 14. Never in my life did I think I'd look at the national stats and see Wisconsin in the top 10 in 3-point attempts per game, but that's where they're at. Now, that can be a great thing if you're hitting, but the thing that would have me worried, and could probably say this about the team a year ago and perhaps future Wisconsin teams if it continues in this direction, is if you're going to be so reliant on the three, you better hit enough to make it worth your while, because there are going to be some games where you're really cold. I think the good news is they've got so many different scorers, and they got guys who can score in a variety of ways. Blackwell and Boyd certainly are able to get in the lane and get to the line, and you've got guys who can score inside. But like, when you shoot that many threes, I think it opens the door for bad things to happen, as much, if not more, than the good things to happen. So I just think the way the offense is designed with that many threes, it has the potential to be problematic. We talked about the bench and do you know what to expect? And not every guy coming off the bench has to give you 9 points a game or something like that. So, it's not always that, but you just want to make sure that when you bring guys in, there isn't any kind of a drop off. And I also think defensively, like if you're going to score more points, it's probably likely you're going to give up more. But a lot of these first 9 games, you look at the 2 losses and you think, well, maybe the BYU one was just such an outlier, but like they did what they wanted to do, and Wisconsin's got to tighten up defensively. And I do wonder what happens when they get into a close game, or when they've got to consistently play quality competition. Do they have the toughness necessary, the mental fortitude to win some of these games? It remains to be seen. The talent, and this is part of what I wrote in the story, it's undeniable. So many guys on this team can hurt you, but you need them playing well at the same time, and you've got to be connected defensively to give yourself a shot if you don't shoot the ball particularly well.
Right. You have to be able to count on more than your offense. That's certainly going to be the case, because there are going to be days where the ball's not falling, and we've seen that a couple times here already this season. And I don't know that they necessarily are playing the way defensively that they would want to, but it's early. And when you have all these guys, and I think you mentioned it, you have all these guys learning the new system together and playing together for the first time on the defensive end and learning the rules. A guy like Nick Boyd or a guy like Austin Rapp, who spent so much time in other systems and then having to come here and play defense the way that the Badgers do, it might take a little bit to get up to speed. But and even that's the same case with the freshmen too. I thought that there have been times where Will Garlock has been getting turned around, and I certainly happened against Marquette. So that to me would be something that would potentially keep him off the floor, unless there's foul trouble, which again there was against Marquette, where you had guys with 2 fouls and he had to come in and play more. But this team as a whole, you like the ceiling of it for sure. You mentioned the 33 attempts. Last year they averaged 28 attempts, and so that was 1,052 attempts last year. And that beat the old record by 243 attempts. They are going to crush it again if they continue to shoot the ball as many times as they do this, as they are. But that's the game right now too. I think that's a lot of people, but it's just so not jarring, but never thought it would be this way unless somebody else came in. You never would have expected it to be Greg Gard changing on the fly and doing it this way. Usually those type of changes have to happen, or do happen, when you have a change as coach. And I think we gave him all the credit in the world last year and the year before for being willing and open to change, and what Kirk Penny did and what everybody has come together and put together this offense. It just doesn't normally happen that way.
Yeah. Now, there is also a calculus to this as well. Like, they had not shot the ball particularly well Just percentage wise going into the Marquette game, they were at like 33.3% or something like that. But they were still in the top 25 and made 3-pointers because they were taking so many. And again, if you're going to rely on the 3, one good thing is it leads to longer rebounds and more opportunities for offensive rebounds. And so I go back to that points per possession thing, which was a big Bo Ryan thing. And Greg Gard certainly knows all about that. Maybe that's what you want if you're going to take that many and you make a third of them. The points per possession might be where you want it to be,
Right,
but
it'd be 1.
But there are going to be some games where it's 6 for 33, and just what do you do then? But just as a fan of basketball, I love watching a team just willing to fire it up there and score a ton of points. But you got to do so many other things well against good teams.
Absolutely. Again, when you look at KenPom and the adjusted efficiency ratings, the offense is up there. It's 27th, but the defense isn't too far back. It's 38th. So it's not like efficiency wise, they haven't been horrible, but when they are bad, they're very bad. Which again, that's kind of been the season. We'll see. We'll see how it all comes together. What else has you a little worried, if anything at all?
I think those are the biggest ones.
Actually, a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What does the rotation, how low does rotation get? Like who ends up being part of this rotation?
Well, I mean, I think what we saw against Marquette is a pretty good indication. If Alexis is going to play like that, it's hard to take him out, but Austin Rapp is going to get starter type minutes. So those are very clearly your top 6. They really like Jack Janicki and what he can provide, and Braden Carrington. Both those guys are going to take minutes in the guard spots. I think it comes down to whether you want or need Will Garlock out there as your 9th guy, and it depends on what else is happening in your front court if you have foul trouble. Beyond that, I'm not sure if I see a lot of minutes available. I mean, we saw like who was checking in the last minute of the game. Hayden Jones, I mentioned before, sort of on that fringe, but I think that's probably the rotation at this point. Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah. It doesn't mean it can't change,
No.
especially because you have so many you have those 4 young guys already. Those guys have already learned a little bit, but they're going to give even more time. And all of a sudden, come February or March, maybe Hayden Jones is ready to play more minutes. Maybe Will Garlock's ready to play more minutes. Those are things that potentially could happen here. So, all right, let's jump into a few listener questions. And we'll start with our friend Ryan. He says, overreaction or no, John Blackwell gets drafted next year higher than John Tonje did this past season.
Wow, this is such a hard question to answer. I think that if he continues playing this way, he's going to play himself into a spot where he won't come back for his senior year. I'll say it's not an overreaction because Tonje was, what was he? 50? What number was he by the Jazz?
He was, he did put the number here, was 53.
53? And there's what, 64 or how many?
I think that's right.
Man, that's really hard. Because Tonje has so many skills to offer. But I do think that Shaka Smart, I mean, I trust his opinion more than I would trust mine. He's like, I've coached some guys who are in the league, and Blackwell is every bit as good. So, boy, I guess I'll say it's not an overreaction. I think it's certainly a possibility.
Chris says, was the TCU loss an anomaly, or is that the type of team that is going to be nightmares for Wisconsin this year?
I think it's hard to know definitively yet. But you see, like Wisconsin, what do they get? 62 points in that game. That's a different type of game than Wisconsin's been playing and gonna play a lot of the times. So, but yeah, that would seem to be the kind of game that can be problematic for Wisconsin. I'd like to know that when they play better opponents, how do they show up for these games?
Well, that was the next question from Gator says, overreaction or no, Wisconsin won't play a single close game this year.
Overreaction. I think there's going to be plenty of close games, but a lot of these matchups have been against overmatched teams. And I'm not obviously not, San Diego, that's quality competition. They went out and played Providence, right?
Yeah,
and
Providence.
obviously TCU, and they went to BYU. Marquette isn't, as I said, very good, but you're going to be playing some better teams here when you get to Big Ten play.
Adam says, overreaction or no, Badgers win out in December. That includes Nebraska and Villanova. Maybe I should want me to pull up the schedule for you?
Yeah, well, I know they've got Nebraska, and then there's 9 days off until they play Villanova. Is like Central Michigan in there?
We're going to find out. I think it is. I think that's late.
Yeah.
There is Nebraska, Villanova, Central Michigan, and Milwaukee.
I don't think it's man.
Really, it comes down to how good is Villanova.
Mm-hmm.
They're off to a solid start at 7-1.
I don't think it's an overreaction.
And Nebraska's undefeated, so
yeah.
I don't know that they've played a ton of quality competition at this point. They do not have Connor Essegian. Unfortunately for him, he had a pretty serious ankle injury and going to miss the rest of the season. So he'll try and be back next year.
It'd be great for Wisconsin if they win those and they're 11-2 when they play Purdue at home.
I guess Nebraska plays tonight. They play Creighton, so I guess they could have a loss on their schedule at that point. But Kansas State, Oklahoma, the Oklahoma team that Wisconsin lost to in exhibition play, Nebraska beat them. So we'll see how that goes. And all right, last one here. Overreaction or no, the trifecta of Boyd, Rhodey, and Rapp, the best portal transfer trio in the Big Ten. Overreaction. Feels like a little bit of an overreaction because there's
this is where I'm going to say I'm not going to pretend to know what the transfer portal situation was for the other 17 Big Ten teams, but I'd be inclined to say that's probably not the case.
I mean, the way Michigan added.
You've also moved one of those guys out of the starting lineup, and Andrew Rhodey's got a lot of potential, but the 17 was a season high. He had 10 in another game. I think it's been hit or miss. But, I mean, if you want to say top guy, like the Nick Boyd one, that's why they spent a lot of money to go get him. But he's been everything they could want out of that position. And you asked what has me excited before, but as I'm thinking about it, because I think we briefly touched on this at the game, like we're only 9 games in, but the future, because it's always going to be about the portal for the foreseeable future, all you got to do is turn on the tape and be like, hey, dude, we brought in AJ Storr, had the best season of his college career. We brought in John Tanjay. Not only did he have the best season of his college career, but he got drafted. And then we brought in Nick Boyd, and he was dominant, 20 points a game. We'll see what it ends up as. I think you have a lot to sell to a top-end guy in the market every year if you can keep doing this.
Absolutely. And you can go back to, and again, it wasn't transfer, but the way Johnny Davis played in his junior season, or was that his sophomore season?
Sophomore, yeah.
Yeah, the way he played, and that was the beginning of this evolution. But this, they've got it humming now. And if you want to play up tempo, if you want to play fast, if you want to have some freedom to shoot whenever you want to shoot, this is a very good offense for you and a very good team for you. There's other aspects to the game, certainly, and I think Greg Gart's trying to continue to hammer those home, but it is offensively very impressive so far.
Yeah, I thought another thing Greg said after the game that was noteworthy is his message to the team before the Marquette game was turn good into great, and it was they are capable of moving the ball well enough to take what could be a good shot and turn it into a great shot. And they may not always go in, but Shaka Smart was talking about the difficulty in defending them because he said the way that they moved the ball side to side put us in situations where we were rotating and we were catching up. And I just think that's something that shouldn't be overlooked either. That takes some time to develop that cohesiveness, but that's part of this offense, this ball screen offense, and the way they can move it around so quickly is if they can play like that, it's going to be awfully difficult for teams to defend. So we'll see whether they can continue that.
Absolutely. Again, they get Nebraska coming up on Wednesday. And then, as you said, they got a little bit of a break here, and then it's Villanova. We'll be back next week. We'll talk a little bit more about the team, look ahead to the rest of the season. We're back, Jesse.
We are back. It's college basketball season. Thank God.
Thank God for Wisconsin fans. I suspect is what you mean there. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks, Zach. Talk soon.
All right. There he is. Jesse Temple from Badger Connect. You've been listening to The Swing.